Hello, my name is James Coman, and today I'll be discussing and analysing how Sir Donald Bradman, arguably the world's best cricketer, rose to fame and how sports delivery systems enabled him to do so. The reason I chose Donald Bradman is simple. Just like Bradman's famous nickname, I'm also the boy from Barrel. Every day my bus would drive past the house Bradman grew up in, and I always wondered how much history and great stories are hidden behind those walls. I've played for Barrel Cricket Club many times also, which is one of the first ever clubs Bradman played for, and where he learnt his skills. Bradman has always been an idol of mine and a very prominent figure in my inspiration for any sport I play. For this analysis, I used the book Don Bradman, the definitive biography based on exclusive interviews with the Don, written by Ronald Perry and published on the 30th September 2014. Defining sport delivery systems isn't easy, as it encompasses so much content and ideas that it's hard to lock down just one definition. However, David Shilbury puts it well in his book, Considering Future Sport Delivery Systems, written in 2008. He says, sports delivery systems are clusters of organizations and institutions, and the increasing ability of sports to leverage financial contributions from organizations relying on a sport's ongoing success in the marketplace. The importance of sport delivery systems may not be clear to most people, but it is far more than it seems. Sports delivery systems are used to increase the role and effectiveness of sport in schools and to boost the number of children participating in the sporting base, requiring national sporting organisations, or NSOs, to have an increased focus on participation outcomes, increasing funding for the development pathway, boosting funding to support our high-performance athletes, and assisting our high-performance athletes to attend and compete strongly at international competition. Firstly, I will discuss how Bradman got involved in cricket and the major events that led to his fame. Next, I will critically analyse the sport organisations that facilitated his progression to the first-class cricket and any other sports organisations that contributed to his success, before finally coming to a conclusion and reflecting on how sports delivery systems affected Bradman. Don Bradman grew up in Barrel, a small country town on the outskirts of Sydney. Growing up, he led a simple life. Being the youngest of 5, he was always pushed to try and outdo his siblings. Bradman's father, George, worked for the captain of the Barrel cricket team, and it was not long before George was convinced to play for the team. Don would go to his father's matches and act as a scorer. This is where his passion for cricket began to grow. Bradman's first experiences of cricket came in muck-around games at school. This is supported by an extract from the book Don Bradman, the definitive biography, through a recount from an old classmate. One day, when young Bradman was batting, the principal appeared beside the bell, and while he was checking his watch, Don said, "How's about I see if I can stop him ringing the bell?" And with that, hit the next ball straight at the teacher, knocking him to the ground. This was where Bradman developed his passion for cricket. In his first organised game for his school, Barrel Primary, he scored 55 not out, and it only took him a year to score his first century against Mittagong at just 12 years old. Bradman made the Barrel senior team at just 16 years old as the excitement of his skills spread around town. He scored 234 runs against future Test bowler Bill O'Reilly and went on to score a district record of 300 in the grand final later that year. These amazing feats generated attention in Sydney, and it wasn't long before he was called to Sydney for Country Week to try out for Cumberland Cricket Club, now known as Parramatta, in 1926. He made the team straight away, however Cumberland refused to pay for his expenses, and therefore Bradman never played a game for them. He was then quickly snatched up by St George Cricket Club in Sydney, who agreed to pay for his travel and accommodation expenses. He quickly flew up the ranks, scoring 110 in as many minutes in just his first game for the club. In the 1927-28 season, he got called up to the state team, and the following year in 1928, he got his debut in the Australian cricket team. Bradman, being a subject of cricket, played mostly ladder tournaments when he played for grade and state cricket. However, when he transitioned to the national level, he participated in elimination tournaments, usually involving 2 or 3 teams. These national elimination tournaments put a lot of pressure on Bradman. Having played ladder competitions on subpar pitches for most of his life, then jumping to important international matches against the best in the world, where a victory was vital, placed a lot of pressure on Bradman. It was this difference in competition that would have been unbeneficial to Bradman's sporting development. Roskiv FM states in his work Miscellaneous Scheduling Considerations in 1993 that players get somewhat locked into relative positions when competing in ladder competitions. So what does this mean? This suggests that ladder competitions are less intense and enable players to be more comfortable in the setting, thus putting less emphasis on winning and more on performance. However, Roskis then goes on to describe elimination tournaments by saying, might induce entries to play desperately, roughly, and unfairly. This contributed to many things, but none more prominent than players who are in form performing poorly, or choking. These two competition formats obviously contrast with each other, and heavily prevented Bradman from developing as a player. As you can see in this timeline, Bradman has always been a very skilled player. In 1924, at just 16 years old, he scored 234 runs for Barrel. In 1930, he got 112 runs in a test match, which made him the youngest player to do so. And in 1930, he scored 452 not out before being chaired off the field by his opponents for his amazing feat. In 1937, he was dropped from the test squad, but came back to score an amazing 270 in arguably one of the best innings of his career. In 1947 to 1948, he led the world-famous Invincibles side on 2 tours in India and England. And of course, in 1948, he got out for a duck in his final innings, preventing him from becoming the first player to get an average of 100 runs. From this timeline, it is evident that despite some challenges, Bradman's player development was exceptional in its ability to prolong his career and sustain his ability to compete competitively at the world stage. Back in the 1930s, there was little money in cricket and limited sports delivery systems, which meant players had to rely on sponsors and organisations in order to compete. When Bradman went to Sydney for Country Week, he was offered for all his expenses to be paid if he played for the St George Sydney Grade Cricket Club. This, of course, was a great offer. Bradman still lived in Barrel while he played for Sydney, meaning he was up at 5 a.m. and home at midnight, which took a toll on him financially. But how did this come about? Bradman was first offered to play for Cumberland Cricket Club, who refused to pay for Bradman, and therefore he never walked onto the pitch for them. Then, in a business move, St George offered to pay for his travel, getting money from local governments and councilmen to pay for his train fares. He was then given the Rockdale home of then club secretary Mr. F. Cush to stay in and try and limit his travel time that he had to endure every day. This in turn enabled Bradman to focus purely on cricket and let him play on proper turf wickets, which dramatically improved the development of his game and enabled him to perform well on the world stage. This, of course, was a big deal back in the 1930s, as the delivery systems available then were very minimal as to what they are now. There were no academies or transition teams for Bradman to play in, and the inclusion of Country Week, which enabled players from the country to come try their hand on proper maintained wickets, was a huge opportunity. Due to the lack of resources cricket had available, Bradman had to rely purely on his talent to do the talking, to attract sponsors and raise funds to enable him to play cricket. The aim of sport development is defined by David Shilbury in his book Sports Management in Australia as the promotion and implementation of change in sport. This relates to Bradman via his increased opportunity to play. Bradman was offered many chances to play despite his financial situation. He was even offered a job by Cricket Adelaide to learn stockbroking in between his cricket commitments. This strong background in sporting development heavily contributed to Bradman's ability to perform at the top level and sustained his career. When Don Bradman first travelled overseas with the Australian team when he was just 21 years old, the Berrima District Cricket Association held a special evening in Barrow's Empire State Theatre to farewell him, with the local community turning out to wish him well. He described the occasion as the proudest evening of my life. This, although small and seemingly insignificant, was one of the most pivotal parts that assisted Bradman in his sport development. The support of the community, in addition with the money raised, gave him the funds and confidence needed to perform in England. But why did this happen? Sport delivery systems, although small back in the 1930s, enabled the tiny community of Barrel to understand and comprehend what Bradman was capable of and what he could achieve. This example suggests that sport delivery systems not only directly affect the athlete, but have a significant impact on the wider community also. Don Bradman, the definitive biography based on exclusive interviews with the Don, written by Ronald Perry, is a very conclusive book and circulates many different ideas and theories about why Don Bradman was the greatest. However, I feel he did not have a firm grasp on the sports delivery systems. Perry discussed many aspects of Bradman's life, but failed to communicate effectively as to how and why he achieved them. Many details I had to research for myself and accumulate my own ideas on the subject, as opposed to reading them out of a book. Before attempting this assignment, I will admit that my knowledge and understanding about sports delivery systems was very limited. But after careful research and adapting the things I learnt on Don Bradman's life, I feel I'm very confident in the matter. Learning about different pathways from the 1930s to now was very interesting and gave me a very wide perspective on sports delivery systems, which I think helped me the most. In conclusion, Don Bradman was very driven and a very confident man. From growing up in a quiet town to playing in some of the most important cricket matches in Australia's history, and still holding records today. The way sports delivery systems were handled back in the 1930s was much different to the advanced technologies that we have at our disposal now. But despite the many disadvantages he faced and lack of pathways he was confronted with, the sports delivery systems still had the ability to deliver the best cricketer of all time. Thank you.